Conditional Selection by Mr. Bagg. Pause this video and write selection quiz in your books. Let's start by asking, what is selection in programming? Selection is like the switches on a railway track. Now, for some railway tracks, you can only go from one place to another place, and you've got no other choice, it's just a straight line. But there are other railway tracks which separate and go off in different directions, and they use a switch to do that. Here we have a railway line that switches off and goes in two different directions. You could go possibly from Redbridge to Romsey, or you could go from Redbridge to Totton. And there is a little switch on the railway track which actually makes the train go one way or the other way. Programs can also have switches that direct the program down one path or another path. So in summary, selection refers to the idea that a program might take different pathways. We have all experienced selection in programs. If you've played the same game over and over again, and you've made different decisions and that's affected how that game has turned out each time, then you have experienced selection. If you've completed an online quiz and it's told you which answers were right and wrong at the end, then you've experienced selection in a program. Now let's look at what conditions are. Conditions help the program decide which pathway to go down. In our train example earlier, there's only really one question that the signaller needs to ask themselves, and that is this the train to Totton? And if it is the train to Totton, if that's true, then they're gonna switch it so that the train goes off to Totton, and if that's false, they're gonna switch it to go off to Romsey. In programming, like our railway example earlier, we can also only have the answer true or false. Let's now take a look at what conditional selection looks like in a block-based programming language like Scratch. Let's have a look at a condition starts action in Scratch. But before we do that, let's just explain these two blocks here, the ask and the answer block. We're just going to take them out for a second. Okay, so every time you click on an answer block, it brings up this little input, and anything we type in there, okay, will end up inside this answer block here. So I'm just going to click the little tick on the side there, okay, and that fish has ended up inside answer. And if you click on it, you can actually get to see that as well. Right, let's put those back in there, and let's go and run that and see what happens when we run it properly. So we've got this if block here, which is our selection block, and we've got the condition here, which is if the answer equals 9, or if the answer is the same as 9, then go and run this say correct block. Let's run the code quickly. Okay, type in the right answer for this time, okay, and enter that, and you'll see we get the correct. Because the answer was the same as 9, it's actually said the word correct. Now let's try the same example, but this time get the answer wrong. So I've put this in here, and I think the answer is 6. So I type in 6 and press enter, and you'll see that nothing happens. Because the answer was not the same as 9, nothing happens. So two pathways have been gone down. One pathway triggered this say correct, and the other pathway didn't start anything at all. Let's now look at the flow of control, the order in which the program runs. So we're going to start at the top with that black dot at the top there, and that is the ask 3 times 3 and wait. And then after that we get this decision diamond. So is the answer the same as 9? And that's our condition. And if it is the same as 9, then it's going to go down the left hand branch way there, and it's going to say correct for 2 seconds. If however the answer is not the same as 9, it's going to go down the right-hand fork, the no fork, and nothing's going to happen. Now let's look at the flow of control for a condition that switches between actions. So here what we've got is an if-else programming block. And just like our last example, we've got that dot at the top, which asks the 4 times 4 question. And then we've got our condition if the answer is the same as 16. But this time, just like before, it's going to, if it is the same as 16, it's going to go down that left-hand branch and it's going to say correct for 2 seconds. But unlike the last example, if the condition is not the same as 16, it will go down the no path. But here it is actually triggering a block of code because it's going to trigger anything inside that else section and say wrong for 2 seconds. Now let's look at the flow of control for 2 conditions, one after another. Okay, so here we've got our same dot at the top, which is our 6 add 6 equals, so we've got our question. Then we hit that condition, the if the answer is the same as 12. And just like in the other examples, if it is the same as 12, it's going to go down that yes left-hand side pathway, and it's going to say correct for 2 seconds. Then it's going to check the next condition. Now, of course, if it says the number 12, it can't also say the word 12. So it's going to have to go down the no condition, the right-hand side pathway for that one. Okay, it is also possible to go down the no for the first condition and the yes for the second condition. There is possible for some combinations of conditions for it to trigger both conditions and run both bits of code, but in this case that wouldn't happen. Now let's look at the flow of control for a condition that is inside a loop, in this case a forever loop. So we've got our black dot at the top, which is our green flag in this case, and then it goes down that first line and goes inside the forever loop, and it goes and checks the condition. So if the right arrow key is pressed, then if it is being pressed, then it's going to go down that left-hand path, that yes path, and it's going to trigger that second black dot, which is the turn right 15 degrees. But unlike the other examples, which carry on with more code underneath sometimes, this one is inside a loop. So it goes back round the loop and goes back and checks that condition again. So is the right arrow key pressed? And if it is again, it's going to go down that left-hand path and trigger that turn right 15 degrees, go back round the loop again. If it finds that the right arrow key is not being pressed, that's false, then it's going to go down that right-hand path and nothing's going to happen and back round the loop again. Now, where this is so useful in Scratch is the fact that inside a forever loop, you're getting 30 instructions per second. So it's going to be checking this condition 30 times a second, which really is quite fast and good for gaming. Let's have a look at what happens when we look at an if-else block that's also inside a forever loop. So it operates in almost exactly the same way as our last example, except for the fact that this time, if the right arrow key is not being pressed and it goes down the no pathway, it still triggers some code. So in this case, it triggers code to turn left 3 degrees, and then it would go back round the loop. So in fact, using this one spaced key, we can actually steer a character right or left depending on whether we're pressing the key and it goes down the left-hand path, that yes true pathway, or if we're not pressing the key, it goes down the right pathway and turns left instead of right. Complete these questions writing the answers only in your books. You can, of course, pause the video here if you want and read them through yourselves one by one, but I'll read them for you if you want to. So number 1, some code branches off in different directions. True or false? Number 2, Most of us have experienced selection without knowing it. True or false? Number 3. There are 3 pathways that code can go down. True, false, and sometimes. Is that true or false? Number 4. Conditions that are checked inside forever loops are being checked 30 times per second. True or false? Loops cannot be used with selection. True or false? I hope you found this video useful. You can find more program videos at https://code-it.co.uk/video.